everyone. Welcome back to our last session of eCOTS 2020. I'm glad that you're here with us to continue our conversation on the hot topics of this week. Now we're going to be talking about the Thursday hot topics, which include using a practicum as the cumulative assessment and intro stats, and in the last 15 minutes, engaging a diverse audience through online learning. So we have Megan Hyman and Eric Reyes, who will be with us for the first portion. Megan Hyman is an assistant professor within the mathematics department at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. Her professional development includes developing bootstrap methodology and R packages. Beyond statistics, she enjoys running, can consume a pint of ice cream in less than 51 seconds, and has a collection of over 1,200 mutated clovers. Eric Reyes is an associate professor at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology within the Department of Mathematics. Professionally, he enjoys collaborating with medical students within the rural health track at the IU School of Medicine and Terre Haute, and undergraduate biology majors at Rose-Hulman. While not working, he is trying to convince his family to go for an afternoon sail on a nearby lake. I would like to thank Eric and Megan for joining us again. And so I would like to go ahead and start out the questions with Megan. So we had a lot of questions about using the practicum in the online or remote environment. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for doing that?
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, actually, so we're obviously finishing up our term here at Rose. So we adjusted our practicum a little bit this term. The spring is our busiest time for intro stats here at Rose. And so we have other instructors that aren't statisticians that are also trying to teach this class along with us, and we need to coordinate our finals. So we don't have the group component this term, a lot due to just the rush that happened during the finals period. We extended the time that students are allowed to work, and we actually removed the data collection portion. So we have the first part set up to really focus on study design. We give them a scenario. They make a recommendation for how to design the study before they would collect data. Then we provided a data set, kind of new scenario, and then let the students, it's kind of an open-ended data analysis with some specific checkpoints that we guide them through.
Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so during the summer, when I teach my online course, I had been thinking about how to adapt this anyway. And so last summer, what I did, I really turned it more into a small project. So it doesn't extend the entire length of the course, but is encapsulated in about a 5 day to 1 week period. I still had groups, and so the students communicated remotely, and I left that up to them, whether they used Teams or Zoom or whether they used email. And then the hard part for me is coming up with a project where they have all the supplies at home, and I can guarantee that they have those. So I opted for comparing flight times of different designs of paper airplanes. So I sent them a website with, here's 20 different paper airplane designs, characterized flight across the different ones. And so I knew they had paper, and they could do some of those comparisons. So coming up with ideas of things that they have access to at home was the hardest part, but I tried to maintain kind of the group data collection atmosphere. Again, just extended the time frame a little bit.
So Eric, continuing with you, one of the questions that we had was issues. Do you know if you've had any issues with cheating or academic dishonesty with these now that it's in an online situation?
Sure. Maybe I'm naive. We've been really, I think, fortunate with our stats class, and I think it's part of our culture at Rose. So the stats sits in an interesting place within the curriculum. Almost all of the other math classes tie directly to a physics or engineering course that the students are taking in sequence. And so physics 1 goes with Cap 1, et cetera. But stats doesn't fit in that anywhere. Stats falls in the sophomore curriculum for our students, but they don't use that material until they take their senior design. And so for whatever reason, students don't see statistics as vital to their progress as some of the other classes. And so I think maybe that part plays into part of it. In terms where there's been like a lot more academic misconduct across other math classes, we've not experienced that in our courses. Now, I also don't go hunting for it and looking for it, but I've not seen any evidence of groups talking to each other or anything. I think that's one nice thing about projects and practicums in general is it's much harder to completely fake one of those than an assignment where everybody's expected to have the same answer.
Right, where you're just writing down A, B, C, D or whatever. Megan, do you have anything to add to that?
I also don't go searching for it. I haven't seen a lot. I think it is kind of the culture of our classroom. We're kind of more relaxed in some ways than some of those other math classes. And so I think students just don't have as much of a tendency. I don't know if this is the right thing to do or not, but in any of my assignments, I put a copyright at the bottom and I write do not redistribute. It's not, I don't know if it's really the truth, but it might scare some of them from trying it.
A little bit of hindrance maybe, or at least a second thought maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had some questions while we've been talking in the chat. One of them is talking about using the, I've lost it, but using the islands. I've lost the direct quote, but have you considered using the islands, or have you heard of the island, the virtual population?
So I love the idea of the islands, and I've considered using it for my biostat class. For our engineering stat class, this sounds terrible. I don't know a great way to say it, but I feel like our students are less interested in the people aspect, which is primarily what's in the islands right now. They're more interested in some of the physical applications. So like the civil engineers want to do things about bridges, and the mechanical want to do things with machines, and they like to remove themselves and don't like the problems I usually introduce that involve more of the human aspect of things. They don't like the unpredictability that people bring into things. So I'm looking, but I am going to be using some of Shonda's games from Grinnell this summer, introducing some of those, the race car game and some of those others I found. So I'm hoping to see how well that goes this summer.
I've used one of hers and I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have the same experience. So everyone keep on your conversation in the chat. That's wonderful. And we'll bring those in. In the meantime, someone asked a debate about the teams, whether the team should be student choice or random or kind of some type of purposeful criteria. Megan, would you like to start with that one?
Sure. I actually really like this question. And I was thinking about it after the session, and it's actually something I've thought a lot about when we've been putting the assessment together. I guess for me, I like that we allow students to pick their own groups. Rose-Hulman is a little bit different from the typical college. It's almost 80% male. And so doing something at random, you can end up with a lot of females that are isolated. And there are studies that show that females may not step up to take that leadership role when they're with a stronger male presence. I know that, of course, every group is going to have its own dynamic. It kind of gives the students that maybe might feel less comfortable that chance to pick who they want to be with. The fact we do want them to work in groups, and I said something yesterday like, oh, we kind of force it on them. So if they don't pick a group, we put them into one. There actually aren't that many that don't end up picking by the end of my class. In terms of would it be better to assign them based on criteria or random assignment? I think that's an open question. I don't know if Eric has anything he wants to add.
I liked the discussion earlier this morning from Alana and Judith and some of their things I hadn't thought about in terms of kind of balancing groups through randomization. And I'm going to actually be stealing off their slides some of the tips that looks like they give their students about how to learn together. I thought those were great ideas. I think, again, we have a unique culture in that because it's primarily engineering school, they work in teams in almost every class. And so a lot of their engineering instructors, especially discipline specific, have their own criteria for what teams are supposed to be like. And so sometimes I feel like the teams go a lot smoother when they're working with their own discipline. And they kind of, again, we're almost like a glorified high school. We have bells, 5-minute passing periods. And so when students come in, they often come in their little clusters and groups, and they sit at the tables together with their friends, and they came to take the class together. They plan their schedule that way. And so allowing them to work together sometimes just feels like, I don't know, the path of least resistance.
I know I've tried different variations. I've tried randomly assorting and then going in and looking at gender to make sure I had a nice mix. And I've tried letting them pick it. It's still something I ponder a lot about what's the right thing to do for. And I think, and even as you're saying, it's going to may vary based on the group of students that you're working with. So someone has said here, can someone share the tips for learning together online that was just referenced? Great. And there was another second for someone encouraging the use of Chandra's games as an easy source of generating experimental data online. One of the colleagues used it in a first year seminar class and had great results.
There was a question about engineering data. And I wanted to say there's 1 or 2 data sets from passion-driven statistics that I found useful in class in the past. And I think Megan would be able to share as soon as we give our final exam next week with our slides, the data set we're putting together for this term. I thought was a really good one, dealing with circuits and things.
A very good example of fitting a set of data to which the students would be interested in, I think. So as we have our last couple of minutes here, was there something, I'll have 2 questions for you. The first is, was there something in your presentation that you had to leave out due to time that you would like to say now? And secondly, what would be your biggest hint or tip to someone who wanted to try this out? We'll keep it open-ended on whether or not you want to say online or not, because we still don't know quite where we're going with that. So what would you think? Eric, would you like to go first?
Sure. I am posting a link to a document Megan put together last night that has some of the questions we asked in the past. So I think in terms of where to start, we came up with a framework of questions we wanted to ask for about any scenario. And then we just wrote through scenarios each term. So I guess I would start with, what's the framework? What are the questions you think are essential that come from your class? And then start thinking about scenarios that kind of match and you can rotate through.
A backwards design type of mechanism. Megan?
I think my answer to both of your questions are something to do with flexibility. And I think one of the big challenges that maybe isn't obvious from our presentation is the planning that it takes to get these scenarios that we can put together where we think students are able to work in like less than 2 hours and get this question, data set, and then the analysis done all during that time. And so having to think through like, oh, this seems like a really good idea for data collection, then I actually sit down and I try it myself and try and think through like, well, if I didn't know exactly what I wanted, how long would this take me to do that? That aspect, having that flexibility and time to plan is really big. And then the flexibility and kind of what type of answers you're expecting from students. That's tough. In terms of moving to online, that's with the data collection portion, I think is a really big challenge if you think towards universal design, again, with everyone having access to materials. One of the links that Eric put up there does have our helicopter that classic helicopter, students probably would have access to scissors and paper, maybe paper clips. But a lot of our other ones, maybe they wouldn't have access to those materials to collect data.
Right, and that becomes a big challenge. Well, I want to thank you both very much for coming back a second time to continuing our conversation about this hot topic and giving everyone some ideas as we move forward into the next summer and then the next school year. So now I'd like to move on to the online learning for a diverse audience group. So thank you. So we have Bev Wood, Rebecca Wong, and Annalise Sabag, who are back to discuss diverse, sorry, I lost your bios. Okay, now, so who are here to talk about engaging online with a diverse audience. So Annalise Sabag is an assistant professor of statistics at Cal Poly State University. She conducts research on assessment of student statistical knowledge and research on students' interactions in online courses. Rebecca Wong is a mathematics instructor at West Valley College. She is currently chair of the Joint ASA Amatic Statistics Committee and is co-author of Introductory Statistics, Exploring the World Through Data with Rob Gould and Colin Ryan. Bev Wood has been teaching statistics for 15 years as an adjunct, a doctoral student, and as an assistant professor, always in a mathematics department. Currently, she teaches almost exclusively online. And so we have some lingering questions from your session, and we'll start to work our way through those questions. But if the audience, just like in last sessions, please post any questions or comments you have in the chat or in the Q&A board, and we'll pull those in as well. So Bev, we'll start with you. You said that you have synchronous discussions. What do your online discussions look like? How do you ensure that students participate?
So the synchronous discussions is when we're doing something like this, and it gets a little challenging to keep track of who's talking and who's participated and not. And so those breakout rooms are a little bit better. I don't actually watch that all 5 students or however many have actually participated in the discussion, but it's a smaller group, so it's a little more likely, and it's noticeable to the other members of the group if somebody's not talking, rather than we do something in a large group setting. Mix of polling and tell me in the chat box what you think about this, raise your hand, give me a green check mark, all that sort of stuff. Keeps them engaged in the discussion, even if I'm not keeping really good track that everybody participated when we're doing it live. It's much easier in the asynchronous discussion. I can tell who's talked and who hasn't. And we use Canvas, and so when it comes time to grade, absolutely, each student, I can see exactly their posts, so I can tell whether they answered the question for themselves to start with, and then did they engage in 2 other conversations with some of their peers. And so that's how I do it when it's online. We have a rubric that includes points for whether or not you replied to other people. Our whole math department has very similar kinds of discussions, and we mix it up, and some that are small group with a calculation sort of thing. Show me how you calculate the answer to this, interpret what the solution was, etc. We use in one of our classes, we use SBI, so not everybody gets the same p-value, and so there's room for all those sorts of conversations, because then you're really talking about, did you do it correctly, not that did you get the correct answer. And so, and then we have other types of conversations about ethics and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's, I hope, an answer to at least part of that question.
It seems to cover it well to me. Thank you. Rebecca. So we had a comment. I was discouraged by the lack of collaborative spirit among instructors as we were thrust online. Are there any live chat opportunities to interact with instructors outside my institution, or a list of mentors for those of us who are pretty much on our own?
This is going to sound very strange if you've never thought about it, but I would encourage everyone to use Twitter for professional development. And I know that sounds weird if you haven't thought about it, but I follow certain accounts, and I'll put it in the chat of who to start following. But I found that the online community is very generous about sharing their resources. And so you just start following a few people that are kind of leaders in the online education movement. And especially if you're interested in humanizing online learning, I'll put a few people to follow there. I don't use Twitter to send my thoughts to the universe. I don't use Twitter to comment on our world. I solely use Twitter as a consumer, and it has been invaluable as a professional development tool. So that's what I would really encourage you to do. And some of the people that I'll put in the chat are actually hosting free webinars next week about moving your class online. Of course, these are general, so you'll have to do the work of thinking about how it works in a mathematics course or in a statistics course. But I would really highly recommend using Twitter. And I know that sounds weird, but I found it invaluable for professional development.
I remember in a past presentation you were in, you highly recommended it. So thank you very much for that. Also in the chat, there's a recommendation of using isostat. And I have to admit, when I've seen isostat mentioned for years in the stat ed conversations, and I've always thought, oh, that's isolated statisticians. I don't belong because I was in a stat department. And Rob Gold in a webinar a couple of weeks said, no, no, no. And I joined, and it's a wealth of information, and I regret not joining sooner. So please, if you have not considered isostat, it is a great, great resource. So Annalise, next question for you. Can you provide more information about the timing of an assignment with collaborative keys? How long do students have to do it on their own? And then how long do they have to work together on the key?
All right, those are very good questions. And I'll try to share my screen here very fast just to show the schedule that I use. Are you able to see the schedule here?
Yes, great,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of collaborative keys, I have one collaborative key. I actually have 2 collaborative keys per week. So my students complete 2 activities, and therefore there's 2 collaborative keys. And I'm talking about in the format for undergraduate students that I found better. So on Mondays, they need to upload the answers for their first collaborative key. They need to upload the answers for their first activity and then start pasting the answers in the collaborative key. Then they have until Wednesday to work with their group members to actually come to the end of the collaborative key and submit it. On that same Wednesday, students need to upload the answers for their second activity and then start the collaborative key, so just pasting their initial answers on the second collaborative key, and that is due Friday. So it took me many hours to figure out a schedule that could work with everyone, you know, and I'm doing everything in an asynchronous situation. And in addition to these assignments, there was a couple questions about homework, and yes, I have homeworks. They're due every Saturday, you know, and they kind of take into account the material that was covered in the activities and the collaborative keys. I also have reading quizzes. They're due every Monday, you know, and what I've noticed in the online class is, especially if you're doing it asynchronous, there is this need for us to help our students to be organized. You know, in the beginning, I was very naive about this, and I thought that, you know, I'll post videos, students would watch it, and I'll do this, and they would follow. And I told the students, there is no way you would succeed in this class if you don't participate, if you don't watch the videos, and it was not enough, you know, and again, with my undergraduate population. So I have this thing on top, which is time allocation. And my idea is, I just give tips for the students, like on Monday, you should be working on your reading quiz and your activity 1. On Tuesday, make sure you're working your group discussion. You know, so little things like this, like give a little more tools for the students to be able to, you know, successfully do all the assignments that are due on that week. So yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. So we have a comment from Dennis Pearl, And CAUSE would be happy to spread the word about an online faculty community that a statistics educator wants to set up on a particular topic. So if you have a topic of interest, please submit the idea and hopefully we can get that going. So in the last couple of minutes, I know some of you had some additional questions, so if you want to address those, but otherwise I'm just going to ask, what would be your tip or hint to those of us who are going to be plunged into teaching online in the next couple of months? What else can you give us to put wind in our sails? And Elisa, you want to start with you?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, one other thing that really surprised me, and maybe I was just naive to think this, was that students were now watching the videos that I uploaded. And like all the comments and everything I made in those videos is to help them, common misconceptions. And then I figured out that, and actually a student told me, she said, the only way we're going to do this if there is a grade attached to it. And I'm like, yeah, I should have known this. So what I did, I started putting questions at the end of each one of my videos, and I created multiple, like part of my homework is just questions about the videos just to make sure that they watched it. So if your classroom uses a lot of videos, or even just a little bit, and they're important for student learning, I do encourage you guys to, add 1, 2 multiple choice questions. It won't take much of your time, just to make students accountable for actually watching it. And there is a very cool website called Edpuzzle. It is paid, but it's super cheap, and you can add questions in the middle of your video, and it's very easy. You can even pull them from YouTube. So for me, that is a very, very helpful tool that helped me a lot.
And while we're going through these, we got another question in the chat, so I'll ask you to kind of do an add-on. So do you have any thoughts on the synchronous versus asynchronous if you have the choice? Because I believe yours are asynchronous, not by choice, but if you had the choice.
So because of the current situation we are in, I don't think a lot of the students have the structure to do a synchronous class, so that's my opinion. So if we were to do things synchronous, there are students that are having to deal with like family members and things, and like they cannot, handle like a synchronous meeting. And so because of the time that we're in, I would encourage asynchronous, and then students in the middle of this chaos, they can find the time, we encourage them, and we say, like my first week of classes is just asking students to create their own schedule. That's what I do in my first week of class. So even right now, this is even more important. So I will still keep with the synchronous, and I would just try to do the best that I can to help students create the time for your classes.
So Rebecca, you're next. So if you could kind of wrap all that all together, your tips for us going into the semester, as well as an additional comment on asynchronous versus synchronous, please.
So in terms of asynchronous versus synchronous, when we moved to this structure mid-semester this time, I was teaching one online class and one face-to-face class. And I chose to keep my face-to-face class synchronous. So, and I checked with them because, and they preferred it because there are students who are online students. They know they're online students. They have the habits that you need to be successful for online students. There are students who never signed up to be online students. They don't have the habit or mindset to be successful in online experience, and they need that interaction, that daily schedule. And so what our college has done for fall, because we decided back in April that fall was going to be online, is we've published a schedule where students can choose. They're going to choose synchronous sections or asynchronous sections. I think for many students who are not typically online students, the opportunity to view classes in a synchronous manner is really important. So I would encourage you, even if you are going to move to an asynchronous online environment, have some kind of structure where students can have a time when, if they choose to connect, they can connect with you. And I think that's also my tip for moving online. Keep it structured. At the end of every semester, I ask my online students if they have advice for me. And always they say, this class is super organized. I love the structure. So every week, Every module looks exactly the same. I love Annalise's schedule. I'm going to borrow it because I don't do a daily schedule with them, but I think that would be great. But every week has, this is what we're going to learn. This is why we're going to learn it. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to turn in. And also have at least 2 due dates, like Annalise has, have at least 2 due dates every week. Otherwise, they're going to wait till Sunday and try to do it all in one day. Those would be my tips.
Great, thank you. Some great tips. And Bev, so tips as we move forward, and synchronous or asynchronous?
Well, I'll answer kind of in the same way, is that you heard strong arguments in both directions, and I think they're both absolutely correct. So if you have any have part of your class synchronous and part of it synchronous.
Bev, I lost you.
See it. I'm not turned up. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, trying to say, to do both. Not, you know, one strong argument each way from my co-panelists, but anything you can do to do both, so that the ones who have these crazy lives and can't sit down at a particular time could watch the recorded of the live and hear their own classmates talking, and be available individually one-on-one with something like office hours, so you can talk to somebody at 9 in the morning instead of with the whole class at 2 in the afternoon. And so it works, but it can work for everybody.
That sounds good. I think there's some great ideas to move us forward. So I just have some closing remarks for everyone. Don't worry, it's really short. But in the spirit of kind of engaging everyone and wrapping up with a reflection, I wanted to share this thought with you for just a minute. I'm one slide ahead. So as you know, the theme of this conference has been engaging everyone. And perhaps before this conference started, you felt like you were a ship on your own in the midst of a storm, trying to get you and your students through your course and learning for the better. You came to the conference and we've learned lots of ways of engaging our students. And I've just listed just a couple of them. There were so many different ideas that I kind of gravitated to the ones that were all started with C. So collaborative keys, whether or not we use COVID-19 data, using clickers, Roxy's talk, all of these ideas are giving us some ideas of maybe how to keep engaging everyone. So maybe the storm is not so bad, but it may still be hard to see how we're going to get where we're going. The fog is still there, but the storm has died down. What we need now is a plan. We have ideas, but how are we going to get there? Each of us come from different situations with different students, but we all have really the same goals in mind. We want to engage everyone. I'd like for you to take a minute, think about the conference and what you've experienced, and think of one task that you would like to do to engage everyone in the coming time. Post it, type it in the chat, but don't hit enter, just like last time. And then we will hit the button and everyone will see it. But in addition to your plan for how you wish to engage everyone, I also would like for you to post the initials of the person that you would like to either collaborate or talk about this with. It doesn't have to be with someone at your institution or even the same type of institution. I talked to someone who teaches at a much smaller school and the school works in completely different ways. But those conversations are extremely valuable, and I hope that they help her move forward as well, as much as they help me move forward. So please, I'll give you a minute, I'll stop talking. think about your plan and the initials of the person that you think you will talk with. And then I'm going to ask the 5 last presenters to come back and read one off. Wow. Okay. So if each of the Rebecca Wong, Bev Wood, Eric, Megan, Annalise, if you could come back on and pick one to share. Rebecca, would you like to go first?
Sure, here's one. Maha plans to use real data, relevant context, more active learning, and collaborative keys, and she's going to reach out to Laura, JLE.
Right. Annalise?
We have one here, incorporating groups in my online classes, maybe all of them. And
Wow.
there is K and B as the initials.
Okay. Eric?
Let's do it. Yes.
Yes, let's do it. Eric?
Implementing polling and clicker throughout the lessons.
Cool. All right. Bev?
So Dennis says that he wants to collaborate with everyone on everything.
Oh, okay. Big task. And Megan?
Creating a better structure and schedule for my class with either TD or KY.
Great, thank you. So maybe that gets us pointed in the right direction so that we can be sailing together for engagement for everyone on calmer seas. The best to everyone. Thank you very much for a wonderful conference. Thank you.